So I have a spooky story for you, and this one takes us back to 2020. We'll say around February or March, right around COVID. So there's an office building full of people. They've worked together for a pretty long time, very few new people, but there were two gentlemen who always saw each other in passing. We'll call one of them Kelvin and the other one Ron. Now, Ron and Kelvin weren't super close, but they knew each other just by virtue of always being at work together. Ron would stop in Kelvin's office and they would chat it up in the mornings, and then Ron would go on his way. So later that March, COVID gets really bad and this company decides to send all of its employees home for telework. And it would go on like this for years. Now, sadly, during the course of this 4 years, this company lost a number of its employees to COVID. And because people weren't coming in the way they used to, a lot of people fell out of touch with their coworkers unless they worked directly with them. Now, fast forward roughly 3 years, it's January 2023, and this company decides to bring all of its employees back to the office. Now, because it's been almost 3 years since everybody's been back in full time, people have shuffled around quite a bit. There's been people who have left for new opportunities, people who've moved divisions, new faces to replace the old faces, people have retired. There's just a lot of new people, and people were generally pretty decent about having to come back into the office. Now, in this 3 years that this company was out, they had done quite a few renovations, shuffled some things around, and so offices moved and weren't where they were previously located. But somehow, much like they had done beforehand, Ron and Kelvin managed to find each other. Kelvin's office had moved from the first floor up to the third floor, and Ron, doing his daily walks, had seen him. Now, Kelvin always got into the office super early, we'll say around 5:30 in the morning. He was one of the first to get there, and he left around 3 p.m. So when Ron came in at around 6 or 7 o'clock, that was usually one of the first people he would go and see. So on one of these mornings back at the office, Ron and Kelvin were having their daily conversation as they did, and all of a sudden the two men stopped because they're both hearing a noise. It sounds like something is creaking down the hallway. Now the two pause their conversations and they listen closely, because typically at that time of the morning, there are very few people in the building. That's when the source of the noise was revealed. It was a custodian with her mop bucket, and she was dragging it along the hallway, creating the disturbance. As she passed by Kelvin's office door, she looked in and she gave a greeting. She kept it moving, but Ron noticed as the woman finished passing that she had a very strange look on her face. So he peered into the office and looked at Kelvin. The two of them exchanged a weird glance and then laughed it off. But during the course of the next month, anytime the custodian was in the building and she passed by Kelvin's office, the custodian always had the same disposition, a greeting followed by some weird expression. But then the custodian, much like she always would drag her bucket and head down the hallway. And the two men would do as they normally did, which is acknowledge the weirdness of the event and go back to having their conversation until Ron had to get back to work and walked away. But everything would change on the day of their town hall. Now, it was the first town hall they had had since they came back to work, and it was something that happened quarterly. All of the employees would shuffle into the auditorium located at the center of the building, and then they would proceed to have a 2-hour-long meeting where information would be shared, there would be hail and farewells, and then you would go back to work. And in this meeting, they honored a list of everyone that they had lost during COVID. They talked about the employees who had transferred out, maybe gone to new offices, those who left the company for new opportunities, and those who sadly passed away. And for every member that had passed away, there was a picture. Now, during this part of the presentation, Kelvin took a moment to survey the audience and see who he could see. And down in the front row, he noticed Ron sitting with the rest of his group. And then he looked across and noticed that there were a lot of people missing. But things got really chilling when Kelvin returned his glance to the presentation. And 2 pictures later, he saw a face that he recognized, and it was the face of Ron. Now, Kelvin looked back down where he saw Ron standing with his group and realized that he couldn't see Ron anymore. But as his eyes carried back up towards the presentation, he noticed a small eulogy next to Ron's picture. The eulogy said Ron had died 2 years ago back in 2021, almost 2 years before they came back to the office and around a year after COVID had started. Ron didn't make it out of the pandemic, and yet every morning, clear as day, Ron was standing inside of Kelvin's office, having a full-blown conversation. And as he sat here processing this, everything started to make sense. The constant weird looks from the custodian, the fact that Ron's visits happened every morning like clockwork, it was something he could almost count on. The fact that every morning, at the exact same time, Ron would find a reason to leave. Now, to this day, Kelvin doesn't know what to think about it and why Ron might have come back to visit him. But I want to know your thoughts in the comments. Let me know if you have any scary office or work stories. You can drop them in my comments or DM me. I want to know if you guys like this story. Again, what are your thoughts on it? Anyways, I will see you guys in my next video.